A headline making waves this year claims that $3 billion worth of U.S. dairy shipments were rejected at the Canadian border. It's the kind of number that sparks instant outrage and fuels heated debates online. But here's the first thing you need to know. That figure is unverified. In this video, we're not chasing viral claims. We're going to separate headlines from hard facts and dig into what's really happening. At the center of it all is something called a tariff-rate quota, or TRQ. It's a trade mechanism that quietly shapes how much dairy can cross the US-Canada border without crushing tariffs. We'll break down exactly how TRQs work, why 2025 has become such a flashpoint, and how it's impacting farmers, markets, and political agendas on both sides. You'll see why this issue is more than just a border dispute. It's a stress test for trade agreements and domestic food supply chains. So here's the question I want you to think about. Is this a case of unfair retaliation, or simply long-standing rules being enforced to the letter? Understanding TRQs and the over-quota mechanism. A tariff rate quota, or TRQ, is not an open door for unlimited trade. It's a system that allows a specific volume of imported goods to enter at little or no duty. Under the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the US has access to roughly 3.6% of Canada's dairy market at these low or zero tariffs. Once that quota is filled, the rules change instantly. Any shipment arriving beyond the limit is classified as over-quota and faces massive tariffs, often between 200% and 300% of the product's value. For certain products, like butter, those rates can reach around 300%, effectively pricing them out of the Canadian market. This isn't a sudden invention of 2025 or a new Trump tariff. It's a long-standing mechanism embedded in Canadian law and trade agreements for decades. From Canada's perspective, the logic is straightforward. It's about protecting domestic farmers, ensuring stable prices, and preventing a market glut that could collapse the dairy sector. By keeping imports within a strict limit, Canada can manage supply levels and avoid sudden price crashes. For U.S. exporters, however, crossing that quota line can turn a profitable shipment into a financial disaster overnight. One container too many, and the economics flip, leaving importers with no viable way to sell the product at a competitive price. That's why monitoring quota fill rates is critical for anyone trading under TRQs. Miss the timing, and even the highest quality goods can be shut out purely on cost. This long-standing framework is the backdrop for the current dispute, and understanding it is key to separating political noise from trade reality. On screen, you might imagine a simple graphic showing Canada's dairy quota fill rate climbing throughout the year, and what happens when it hits that over-quota red line. 2025 context: politics, trade, and flashpoints. By 2025, Canada's political stance on supply management had become crystal clear. Prime Minister Mark Carney sent a firm message. Dairy, poultry, and eggs under supply management were non-negotiable. This wasn't just talk for domestic audiences, it was a signal to global trading partners that Canada would enforce its tariff rate quotas to the letter. On the U.S. side, exporters were pushing hard to fully utilize their allotted quota under the USMCA. In some cases, shipments edged past the limit, triggering the steep over-quota tariffs. At the same time, the broader narrative of Trump tariffs 2025 was dominating headlines. Public perception began linking the dairy dispute directly to a wider U.S.-Canada trade conflict, even though the TRQ mechanism had existed for decades. Washington emphasized the need for greater market access, framing the issue as part of its strategy to strengthen U.S. leverage in cross-border trade. Ottawa stood its ground, insisting that the agreed ceilings were fixed and would not be relaxed. The result was a tense standoff, both sides unwilling to budge, each seeing the matter as a test of credibility. For Canada, it was about defending a cornerstone of its agricultural policy. For the U.S., it was about proving it could expand access for its farmers in a market it has long sought to penetrate further. If you picture a timeline graphic, you'd see key moments from early 2025. Quota utilization climbing, political statements intensifying, and shipments beginning to hit the over-quota wall, leading right up to the point where the dispute hit the headlines. What happened at the border? From over-quota to turned around. When a U.S. dairy shipment arrives at a Canadian port of entry, customs officials first check the current tariff-rate quota fill rate. If the quota is already maxed out, that shipment is instantly classified as over-quota. From that moment, the economics change completely. Over-quota tariffs, often between 200% and 300% of the product's value, make it financially impossible for importers to sell in the Canadian market. Faced with those costs, most importers simply refuse delivery. The goods are then redirected back to the United States. This is where the viral numbers come in, claims of $3 billion worth of rejected shipments, and 200 containers making a U-turn. But here's the important part. Those figures remain unverified. As of now, there is no official confirmation from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, or U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, to substantiate them. While the scale is uncertain, the immediate market impact is easier to confirm. When high-value dairy products, cheeses, butter, specialty items, are sent back, they flood into an American market that is already oversupplied. Cold storage facilities, many operating near capacity, are suddenly tasked with absorbing even more volume. Retailers respond by slashing prices to move the product quickly, creating short-lived bargains for consumers but driving down wholesale prices for producers. This chain reaction, from a quota check at the border to price drops on U.S. shelves, can happen in a matter of days. It's a stark reminder that in perishable goods markets, timing and logistics are every bit as important as politics or trade agreements. Pressure on U.S. farmers and the dairy supply chain. By mid-2025, U.S. dairy farmers were already navigating one of the toughest market environments in recent years. According to USDA data, the national all-milk price was hovering around $21 per hundredweight, down about $1 from earlier in the year. The dairy margin coverage, DMC margin, a key profitability indicator, had slipped to its lowest level of the year, leaving farmers with little breathing room. The pain was most acute in Wisconsin and California, the nation's top dairy-producing states. In both regions, processors began reporting slower product movement, while cheese and butter inventories started piling up. Cold storage facilities, which had been running close to full, were suddenly stretched beyond capacity as redirected shipments from the Canadian border poured back into the domestic market. This glut left retailers scrambling to move product before spoilage. The fastest solution? Slash prices, sometimes selling below cost, to clear shelves. While bargain hunters enjoyed cheaper dairy, wholesale prices took a hit. Lower wholesale prices meant slimmer margins for producers, many of whom were already operating on razor-thin profits. At the same time, the cost side of the equation wasn't easing up. Storage fees rose as processors were forced to rent additional space. Transportation costs climbed as products were rerouted or shipped to more distant markets to find buyers. Refrigeration expenses increased simply to keep excess product from going bad. For small and mid-sized family farms, these combined pressures were punishing. With less financial cushion, some were forced to cull herds, delay equipment upgrades, or cut labor to stay afloat. Even larger, More diversified operations felt the strain as revenue from core dairy lines fell faster than they could adjust production. The National Milk Producers Federation, NMPF, issued a mid-year warning. If lower prices, higher costs, and export disruptions persisted, many producers could see profitability erased entirely before the end of the year. In the dairy business, margins are always thin. But 2025 has proven just how quickly those margins can collapse when global trade hiccups send shockwaves through the supply chain. From the border to the cold storage warehouse to the farm gate, every link in the chain is now feeling the pressure. Canada versus US. Regulations and consumer perception. Canada's dairy sector operates under some of the strictest quality and traceability rules in the world. One key regulation is the outright ban on recombinant bovine somatotropin rBST, a synthetic hormone used in some countries to increase milk production. In addition, Canadian law requires full traceability, meaning every shipment of milk can be tracked back to the specific farm where it was produced. These policies are designed to maintain consumer trust, ensure consistent quality, and protect the stability of domestic supply. The United States takes a different approach. While federal law mandates the country of origin labeling, COOL, for certain agricultural products, it does not uniformly apply to all dairy items. Instead, U.S. labeling rules focus on product identity, nutritional facts, and safety standards under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. There's no federal requirement to disclose whether a product contains rBST, nor to provide detailed farm-level traceability for most dairy products. These regulatory differences shape consumer perceptions in each country. In Canada, strict controls and traceability foster an image of premium quality and local integrity. In the U.S., the emphasis on choice, variety, and competitive pricing can mean consumers rely more on brand reputation than on regulatory guarantees. For exporters, these differences can influence marketing strategies. What is seen as high quality in one country may simply be considered standard in another, and vice versa. Ultimately, these contrasting systems highlight why cross-border dairy trade is about more than just tariffs. It's also about meeting consumer expectations that are shaped by very different regulatory environments. International ripple risks. While the U.S.-Canada dairy dispute has dominated headlines in North America, other major trading partners have been quietly paying attention. Officials in the European Union, Japan, and Australia have been monitoring developments closely. Their concern is straightforward. If the U.S. loses significant access to the Canadian market for an extended period, it could lead to a surge of surplus dairy seeking alternative destinations. This scenario, often called surplus dumping, can disrupt local markets, push down prices, and strain existing trade relationships. So far, none of these partners have taken concrete action, such as imposing new tariffs or adjusting their import quotas. But in global trade, perception matters almost as much as policy. Even the suspicion of an incoming glut can make buyers more cautious, slow their purchasing schedules, or negotiate harder on price. For U.S. exporters, that means reduced leverage and potentially thinner margins, even if no formal barriers are put in place. It's a reminder that trade disputes rarely stay contained within two borders. A standoff with one neighbor, especially a key partner like Canada, can send ripples across multiple continents. And in the highly interconnected dairy market, those ripples can quickly turn into waves that reach far beyond the original dispute. Strategies for adaptation. Business and policy responses. When a trade dispute tightens market access, both the private sector and policymakers need to move quickly to limit the damage and prepare for the next disruption. For businesses, one of the most immediate steps exporters can take is to closely monitor Canada's TRQ fill rates on a weekly basis. By tracking these numbers, companies can adjust shipping schedules to avoid hitting the over-quota wall. Another tactic is to split shipments into smaller lots and time them to land during quota windows, periods when there is still available quota space. Diversifying product lines can also help absorb the shock of lost market access. By shifting part of production toward longer shelf-life items such as powdered milk, whey protein, or aged cheese, exporters can buy themselves more time to find alternative markets without losing product to spoilage. Voluntary labeling is another competitive tool. Highlighting attributes like rBST-free or clear origin labeling can build trust and create a premium perception, even in markets where such disclosures are not legally required. From a financial perspective, companies can use hedging strategies or forward contracts to lock in prices and reduce exposure to sudden market swings caused by export disruptions. For policymakers, on the policy front, one option is to trigger the USMCA dispute settlement process to review how Canada allocates its TRQ. While this process can be slow and its outcomes uncertain, it offers a structured way to seek changes or clarifications in quota administration. Investing in domestic processing and storage capacity is another strategic move. Expanding facilities that can handle surplus milk, by converting it into storable or export-friendly products, reduces the risk of bottlenecks when exports are blocked. Finally, targeted support for small and mid-sized farms is crucial. This could include subsidies for cold storage, assistance with transportation costs, or temporary relief programs to bridge income gaps during market disruptions. Taken together, these business and policy strategies create a more resilient dairy sector, one that can withstand the sudden shocks of quota enforcement while positioning itself for stronger, more stable market access in the future. The next 2 months will be critical for understanding whether this U.S.-Canada dairy dispute escalates or starts to cool. Key indicators to track include Canada's TRQ fill rates, which reveal how quickly duty-free access is being used up. Watch for inspection updates from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA. Sudden spikes in rejections or delays could signal more friction ahead. On the domestic side, keep an eye on the all-milk price reported by USDA and cold storage levels for cheese and butter. Rising inventories could indicate surplus pressure building in the U.S. market. Finally, pay attention to public statements from the National Milk Producers Federation, NMPF, and the International Dairy Foods Association, IDFA, as they often hint at policy priorities and industry strategies. Stepping back, the takeaway is clear. This isn't a brand-new tariff. It's the strict enforcement of long-standing TRQ rules, but happening in a highly sensitive political and supply environment. That combination is what makes 2025 feel like a turning point. So here's the question for you. Should the U.S. focus on opening more foreign markets or strengthening its own processing and storage capacity first? If you found this breakdown valuable, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight could shape our next deep dive.